So good evening everyone and welcome to this beautiful channel named Geeks for Geeks School. And today we are here for developing a responsive login form. And this is what the user is going to come across when he will open the final result on this beautiful browser. Okay, so there is a text getting reflected right on the top of this web page, and then there is a button with this text login, which we are able to see getting reflected on the head of this button. Now when the user will hit this login name button, this is what he is going to come across. So this is a beautiful login form which you are able to see right now. If you want to get rid of this beautiful login form, you just have to hit this cross button and it will go down. Fine. In case if he opens it up on a mobile device, so this is what he will come across when he will hit this login button. So again, this beautiful form will be visible to him, where he can input his username and he can input his password, whatever password he want to input for his profile, and after that he can hit this login button. Fine, so that's what we are going to develop today. Let's dive into the code.org platform and check out how can we make use of simple HTML and CSS coding for developing this beautiful thing. So this is what you are going to come across when you will access the weblab on your respective devices. Fine, so now the first thing that we have on this web page is this text model login form, which is getting reflected right on the top. So we need to first define the HTML code for this thing, right? So what I am doing, I am copying this whole text from here and I'm going to come over here on this beautiful HTML page, and let's make use of header tag. So I'm making use of this h2 header. Fine, and here I am going to paste this text I just copied in between these two header elements. Fine, so this is what the user will come across. So we are able to see this model login form getting reflected on this stage area. Now after this we have a button, the login button, which you are able to see just below this model login form. In order to get this on this stage area, we guys can make use of this button tag, right? And besides this I would like to style it also. So I will be using inline styling for styling its width. So I would like it to automatically select a width, okay, for itself. So that's what I can define for this style attribute. So I have passed this value auto for this width property, right? And after this we can place a semicolon, and then we can write down login, the text which we want to get reflected on the top of the button, because button is a container element. So we need to define the end tag also for this button container. Okay, so we are good to go, and now this login button is visible to us over here on this stage area. Okay, so now what? Let's go back on this original web page. Now when the user will hit this login button, this is what he is going to come across. So there is an image button. It's a kind of form, right? It's a kind of form that we are able to see, right on the top of which an image is getting reflected of the company. And then there are couple of more fields which we are able to see just below this image button. So let's now define the required HTML code for getting all these stuff on the stage area. So the first thing is this image, right? But for defining this whole form, the strategy that I am going to make use of is I will be making use of a separate division section for defining the complete form. So division, and let's have ID for this division. So with the help of the ID, whatever ID I will be defining for this division section over here, I will be using this ID name for calling it when this button will be clicked. Okay, so it is the main thing we need to focus on today. So I am going to define this ID 01 for this division section. And besides, let's define a class also with which we can customize the appearance of this beautiful division section, in which we will be defining all the HTML code for every component that we are able to see over here on this beautiful login form. So let's have this class named model. Okay, and then we can end the division tag over here. Fine. Now in between this division section, I would like to make use of the form tag, because it's a form that we are going to develop now. So let's have a class for this form. So I would like to have a class with name, let's say, how about model content? I think this is looking pretty relevant. This is pretty relevant to what we are designing right now. Okay, and then let's have one more class with which we can integrate some animation also to this form. So animate is a second class name I've defined for this form tag, and I am closing it over here. Okay, and then we can close the form tag like this. Fine. So now this form is in between inside this division section, for which the class name is model and the ID name is ID01. Fine. Okay, let's come inside this form and define the required HTML code for the components which are visible to us over here on this particular login form. So the first thing that I would like to define is again a division section in which I will be keeping all the components. So this time I am defining a class with name img container for this division section, and let's close this division section because it's a container tag, right? That's the reason we need to define both the ending point as well as the starting point. Okay, so now inside this division section we are going to have this span tag, and if the user if the user will click the span tag, so what should happen? I would like to I would like this form to get down, or you can say I would like the form to close. So if the user will hit this cross over here, fine, so the form is now no more visible to us. And if he will hit this login button again, the form is again going to appear on this browser. Fine, so that's how these buttons are working right now. Okay, now for this span tag that we just defined over here, we are going to make use of this span tag for getting this X thing which is getting reflected right on the top in the right side of this login form. So in between this span tag, I am defining this X, and let's define this closing tag also for this span because it is a container tag, right? Okay, very well. Now once I'm done with defining the whole HTML code for getting the required components over here on the stage area, I will define the required code for this on click event. Okay, fine. Now let's go on to this next thing, which is this image which is getting reflected right on the top on this login form in the center. So what we can do, we can make use of this img attribute for getting the image on the stage area, and let's make use of this attribute src for fetching the image using this link. So this is the link which is going to help me in accessing the image which we are able to see right on the top in the middle of the login form. Okay, so I'm going to place it right in between these two double inverted commas. So that's the way you can access an image on the stage area, right? And besides that, I would like to define an alternative text also in case the user fails to access the image. So this is the text which will be visible on the web page in place of this uh, image, right? Okay, and let's have a class also with name avatar for this image tag. So as you can see now, the image is visible to us over here. Great. So we are done with defining the required code for the first division section that has to come inside the form tag. Right. So in this first division section, we have this cross and this image which you are able to see in the center of this login form. Now we are going to define another division section, and this time I would like to define a class with name container for this division section, and here I am ending this division section. Now in between these two division section, we are going to define the code for these components which you are able to see over here just in the bottom of this image tag, right? So the first thing is the label box, right? In this label box, this username text is getting reflected. Now, and besides that there is one more point that we have to keep in mind, and that point is this text over here is getting reflected in bold, right? So what I am going to do, I'm going to put this label over here, and let's end the label tag because it is again a container type of element. Now in between these two label tags, let's write down username and check out how it is going to appear on the stage area. So this is how it is appearing on the stage area. It's not getting reflected in bold. So in order to change the font, we can make use of this bold tag, and let's enclose this username in between the bold tags. So now the username is getting reflected over here on the stage area in bold. Okay, so we are good to go with this username. Let's now define the code for the input box over here, which is right below this username. So for getting this input box, we can make use of this input tag. Okay, and then because the type of this input box is text, we can write down any text over here. So for the type attribute of this input box, we need to pass this value text. Fine, and what is getting reflected by default inside this input box? So enter username is getting reflected, right? So what we can do, we can make use of this placeholder field, and let's pass this enter username as a value for this placeholder field. Okay, and besides that, I would like to connect it to this label box. Now if you don't want, and so what you can do, you can make use of this name uname. You can define a specific value for this name property, and here in the label box you can define the same value whatever you have defined over here for this name property for this for property. That's how you can connect this label box with this input box. Okay, and if you want it to make mandatory for the user to input some or the other thing over here, so what you can do, you can make use of this field called required. Now this will put a validation on this input box. Fine, so now if the user will not enter anything over here in this enter username field and will come on this login button and hit this directly, so this is the message he's going to come across. Please fill out this field, because it is mandatory for the user to fill this up with some or the other thing, right? So this is what this field is doing over here. Okay, fine. Now what we can do, we can copy this entire thing, and we guys can paste it just below this input boxes HTML code like this. Fine, and this time we are going to make use of this code for the label box which this password is getting reflected, and this input box. So let's make the required changes over here. So this is going to be for the password, and the other one is going to be, okay, this one is going to be for the password, right? So now all the four components are visible to us over here. Fine. And is there anything else we are missing? Let me just check over here. So we have one checkbox also, just next to which some text is also getting reflected. So in order to get this checkbox, the tag that you can make use of is this input, right? And let's now pass this value checkbox for this type property of the input tag. And by default, this checkbox should be checked. So what we can do, we can make use of this property checked, and for this we need to pass this value checked only. So now by default we will see a small tick inside the checkbox. Okay, so that's what you are going to get is an output. Now besides this, we have a text also which is getting reflected next to this checkbox, and which is remember me, right? So we can write down simply in between this input tag and the division tag like this, remember me. Okay, so now I'm done with defining the whole HTML code for these components. Okay, and besides this, we have missed one more thing. There is a button which is getting reflected right in the middle of this input box and this text over here. So we need to define the required code for this one too. So I'm going to put the HTML code for getting that button on the stage area right in between these two input boxes. Okay, so the code that we can make use of is button, and let's now define a type for this button. So I would like to have a submit kind of button, right? And on the top of this button I would like to see login getting reflected. Let's close this button tag, and now this login button will be visible to you guys on this beautiful stage area, right? Okay, so we are good to go with this section. Now let's come on the last part, which is this footer part of this login form, in which there are two things for which we have to define the HTML code for. One is this cancel button, which is getting reflected in the left side, on the left side, and the other thing is this forgot password, right? Okay, so let's go back on this HTML document and define the required code. So just after this point where this division, the second division section is ending, I am going to define this third division with, let's say, class name is going to be same. The one that I've defined for the second division, the same I am going to keep for this third one also. And let's now define some style for the background color. So I'm making use of this inline styling, background color. Okay, and now there's some gray kind of color which is present right in the back of this footer part of the login form. So let's define the required code for getting the color. Okay, so we have this over here. Let's end this division section. Fine. Now we can define the HTML code for getting this cancel button and this forgot password on the footers on the stage area. Sorry. Okay, so for getting the button, we can make use of this button tag, and this time I am going to have a button type of button, right? Okay, let's close this over here. And then Let's define a class also for this. So I would like to have a class with name cancel button. Fine, for this button tag. Now in between the starting and ending point of this button tag, I would like to define a text which should be visible to me on the cancel button. So it is cancel. Okay, so the button is visible to us over here. Let's now define the code for that forgot password thing. So I would like to have this span tag, and let's make use of a class also with name psw. Fine, and then forgot. Let's close. No, I'm not going to close it. Why? Because this password is present in the form of hyperlink. So for getting this password in the form of hyperlink, we can make use of this anchor tag. And for this href property, let's pass hashtag. If you don't know why I have passed this hashtag value for this anchor tag, you can check out the previous lectures in which I have explained it in a brief way. Okay, so password question mark, and let's close the anchor tag, and also we need to close this span tag. Fine, so this forgot password is also now visible to us over here on this beautiful stage area. Okay, so we are almost done with defining everything related to HTML coding. Let me just check one more time if I am missing anything. So I'm going to come on the top, and let's check whether we have missed anything or not. So this is the code which is going to help which is helping us in getting this model login form on the stage area. This one is for this button. Now when the user will hit this button, I would like the login form to appear. Now I have placed the whole code for the login form inside this division section, for which the ID is ID01. So what we need to do, we need to connect this button, this login button, which the user will be able to see, is going to see initially getting reflected on the web page, with the division section in which the whole in which the complete code of the form is there, right? So how can we do that? So we guys are going to we can make use of this on click property, and now when the user will click this button, I would like to access this division section with the help of this ID. So I think this is the code which can help us in doing the same. Document will help us in accessing this whole document, and then we can make use of get element by ID, right? This is the code with which you can access any element with the help of the ID you have defined for that element. So the ID of this division section which I want to access is ID01. Okay, and then what is the kind of style, in what kind of style I want to see that login form, that's also what we have to define. So I would like to see it. Style.display is the code that you guys can make use of for defining the display of the login form. So I would like to see it in a block kind of display, right? Okay, so let's pass block in between these two single inverted commas, because double inverted commas we have already made use of for passing this value for this on click property. Okay, and now is there anything else we are missing? Width is going to be, okay, I haven't defined the width for this button, right? Let me define the width also. So for that we can make use of this inline styling thing. Width is going to be auto only, because I want the login form to automatically get the width based on the device on which the user is accessing the form, right? Then it is login, and finally it is button. Then there is this division section. Okay, then there is this form section, then comes this division section, and then there is this span for this X button, right? Now when the user will hit this X button, I would like the form to go disappear. So for doing that, what we can do, we can define an on-click event for this X button also, for this X text also. I am copying this whole code from here, okay, and I am putting it inside in between these two double inverted commas. So now in place of this block, because I don't want to see any kind of thing getting reflected on the stage area except this model login form or this login once the user is done with hitting this X button. So that's the reason passing none as a value for this display property over here, right? And let's now do one more thing. Let's have a class also, unique class for this span tag. So I would like to have a class with name close, okay. And anything else, I think this much is fine. So we are done with defining almost everything. This is going to fetch for us the image. Find this Geeks for Geeks logo. And then do we have anything else over here? Let me just check it. So there is one more button, this login button, which we are able to see over here getting reflected. Okay, and then we have this cancel button also. Where is the cancel button? This is the cancel button. No problem. Let's now start customizing the appearance of whatever we have defined till now. So for doing that, we need to come on this style.css file and let's eliminate everything whatever is getting reflected by default, right? So the first thing that I would like to customize the appearance of is the input tags. So there are two types of input fields I have defined. One is the text type of input field, and then just a second, I think I have missed something over here. Input type, it should be password, right? Because I don't want the password to be visible to the user. If suppose the user will type over here in this input box something, so it will get converted automatically into these bullets kind of things. Why? Just because of this value which I've passed for this type. So let's copy this whole thing and I am placing it over here. So, and I am also changing it to password. So now whatever code I will be defining in between these double braces, that will be applied to the input fields with type text and password. So the first thing that I would like to do is let's have 100% width for both the input types. Then let's have some padding also because I want to see some space inside the input box. I don't want this text to actually touch the borders of this input field. So padding is a property that we can make use of, 12 pixel by 20 pixel. I think this is going to give us the correct output. So yes, we are getting this thing over here. Then we can have something for the margin also. Let's have 8 pixels 0. What kind of display I want to see them in, because they are the part of the same division section, right? So I would like to define this inline block kind of display for this username and the for these input boxes and the password input box also. Fine, and then we can have something for the border. So let's have a border of 1 pixel and it should be a solid border, right, of this color. Then we can have something for the box sizing also. If you guys don't know about these properties, do check out the previous lectures I've posted on this beautiful Geeks for Geeks school channel. Definitely you will be able to learn about each and everything. Okay, now let's define the required cascading style sheet code for this button tags, right? So I would like to have a background color first. So it should be, let's choose some color from here. Let's go for dark cyan. I think this is going to be fine. Yes, dark cyan is also looking good. Then we can have the color for the text which is getting reflected right on the top of these two buttons. So I would like to have a color or a white color for these text which are getting reflected right on the top of these buttons. Fine, so now it is getting reflected in white color. Now if you want to define some spacing inside the button and want to see some space in between this text and the borders of this button, so the best way is to make use of this padding property. So I would like to have a padding of 14 pixels by 20 pixels. I think this is fine. Yes. Okay. Let's have some margin also. So the margin which I've defined for these two input boxes, I would like to define the same margin for these two buttons also. That's looking great. Now I want to see any kind of border. So 0 is the value I'm passing for this border property for the buttons. Now if the user will bring the cursor on any of these buttons, you know what is happening? The cursor is changing into a pointer kind of thing. How can you get this kind of result? So you can make use of this cursor property and pass this value pointer for this property. Right, now when you'll expand this window and bring the cursor over these buttons, so the cursor will change into a pointer kind of thing. Right. Okay, let's now define the width as 100%, the way we have defined it for these input boxes. So that's what you will get is an output finally after defining the required cascading style sheet code.